Welcome back, everybody, to Unfiltered Vet Discussions. Today we have Phil, David, Cody, myself, and Rob, who will be discussing. Per normal, you'll see our smiling, shining faces on our website along with our bio if you have absolutely no idea who we are at unfilteredvetdiscussion.com. We have a little bit interesting discussion today. It's going to be based on an overseas study that just came out. And that study is called, if you haven't heard about it, Veterinary Services for Household Pets in the UK. And Phil is going to kick us off with a little bit of a summary besides the title before we dive into a discussion around it. So Phil, can you tell us a little bit more?
So this has been going on for a minute. There was really some hubbub in the UK about veterinary prices. I think potentially even one of the like investigative news services had run a story on it, and so this led to an initial investigation into the veterinary market in the UK, and so couple things in the UK is that in the UK is smidge different, but I think similar-ish numbers is, if I remember correctly, it's about 60% of veterinary practices in the UK are owned by a large consolidator, large corporation, and there's about 40 private practices. Couple things that stood out to me was in certain postal zip codes, I think is how they phrased it, was that there really wasn't any competition from either private practice or even potentially even other corporate entities. Is that the corporate entity owned the veterinary hospitals like in that area, so people in that area only had the choice to go to one place. The other thing, and Cody had brought this up, this was one of the things that stuck out to me, is that in the UK, and I'm not sure what it would be if we were to do this in the US, but 1 out of 5 clients that went in, only 1 out of 5 got no estimate for, no treatment plan or discussion around the financial implications of the treatment plan that the veterinarian had made. 1 in 10 clients didn't receive anything along those lines when it came to a surgical procedure. And I think it was even lower, if I remember correctly, and we'll have to go back to it, but I think it was like 1 in 4, or maybe even half of they called it out of hours or emergent, treatment plans. They didn't know what the cost was going to be. And, a couple things there that were interesting is just, I would say this, one from a communication, client trust perspective, and even really from a well-being point of view, is dropping having a client potentially have an expectation for what cost of care is going to be, where that changes for us, even a couple, 3 times a year, is that a client may remember something, 5 years ago, and that, I remember bringing my dog in for this and it cost this much. Is that clear communication around finances, building trust there, and understanding the impact that would, just putting myself in the client's shoes of walking in a stressful situation and then making these decisions and then potentially getting hit with something that was, a number of thousands of dollars higher than, I expected. And so, that too, from a well-being perspective, we have a saying in the South that says, don't hit your shin on a stool that shouldn't have been there in the first place. Is having that open and honest discussion, with a client that allows us to generate a spectrum of care as well. Like that may not be that may not be possible for that particular client, and us to be able to come up with other treatment plans. So those 2 things, so lack of competition in certain areas, and then price transparency, I think is the 2 things we could talk about.
I've always liked looking at the UK market because I've viewed it a little bit as a crystal ball to the North American marketplace, especially around the corporatization, right? It seemed like the UK marketplace had a faster or more accelerated rise to this percentage of corporate hospitals owned across, across the country. So it's always been speculated within the US and Canada as to like, well, what is our saturation point, right? I've always been interested in this term saturation point of like, is it 60% saturation? Is it 80% saturation? Is it 90% saturation? You can look at other industries as well. You can look at, the ophthalmologists, you can look at the dentists. They're a little bit of a crystal ball when it comes to the corporatization of business. But the UK has always been interesting to me because they truly had a meteoric rise in terms of corporate adoption. So I've always kept my eye there. And then to Phil's point, I think the gist of the study that popped out to me when I had read it a few weeks ago was just this like around the consumer trust aspect, right? Because as you start to get larger and larger players, this is when you start to get the consumer trust groups to turn an eye to you, and sometimes they find nothing, right? They think that there's enough competition and there's market segmentation and there's transparency and it's not bad for consumers, but sometimes they see some of these questions that pop up, and the one around estimates, for me, that's not as interesting for my practices or my specific jurisdiction, because we have really strict rules around estimates. So everything that I do within my jurisdiction needs an estimate. It has to be upfront from the beginning. Everything, whether that's a vaccine appointment, even if I go out to preg test a single cow and that costs $5, I've got to disclose to the farmer what that pricing is going to be. That's very well defined. But on the flip side, what the UK, I guess, pressure has also shown us is now there's some groups that are coming to light of consolidating a bunch of price points and publishing them to the public in this overarching price transparency guideline, which is very, very interesting to me. My jurisdiction also doesn't allow price transparency. So while it requires me to be very strict with my estimates, I'm not allowed to post any pricing anywhere publicly. I cannot tell somebody in the public that my vaccine cost is this, or my spay cost is this, or if I have a 10% deal. I can't make any mention of that, or I will get a reprimand. And I don't think that's actually good for consumer trust. I think there needs to be more price transparency in veterinary medicine. I'm a huge advocate. It has to be clearly defined. So it can't just be, I don't think the vet industry should be able to put low cost spay $49.99 on a billboard next to a freeway without disclosing what does that mean? Like, what's included? Are they, is there enough context around that pricing for the consumer to be truly informed? I think there needs to be more information that, we have technologists that are highly trained that are monitoring anesthesia, and we're placing catheters, and we have IV fluids, and we're doing multimodal pain control. Like, there needs to be a lot of context around there. But for me, that was the interesting thing to see this consumer protection group in the UK now consolidating a whole bunch of veterinary prices and publishing those publicly, as a window into what vet prices are.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point, Cody. And, I know our group of practices, we have two low cost, spay and neuter clinics in our area. And that's, that too is important, is that, is understanding it's not apples to apples, is that there's certain folks that really are better, that they're better served going, to the spay and neuter clinics, and we will guide them there. But we do let them know, what is the difference, between that, and what are the differences in the cost? Because again, if I'm a consumer, I put myself in their position. It's like, well, why would I do just throwing a number out there, a $400 spay, when I can get it done for $50 at this place? Like, and if all I have to go on is the number, then again, as you said, there's no value associated with that. There's no understanding what comes with that. So I think that is a really, really good point.
I like the fee transparency, but I think it comes with a lot of responsibility There it
and
is.
an onus on whoever's publishing that to say, okay, this one is lower, but there's no surgical monitoring. There's no multimodal pain management. There's no aftercare. Because otherwise, an uneducated consumer is going to make an assumption that, okay, lower is the same.
Mhm.
And that scares me. But I think at the same time, I like the idea of that some sense of transparency. But of course, here we've got Sherman antitrust, so it's hard to crack open that as far as comparing fees. But even some basics like vaccines, exam fees. Uh,
I've got an example, and this I always think about this example, and I think is really, really important. And of course, it is just an N of one, but I've had other examples like this. But this exact scenario happened to me this summer. I was sitting up front in one of my practices with the client care coordinator, and a young man walked in with his puppy, and he had asked if we had any appointment spots for the following Friday because he had payday coming and his dog was overdue for vaccines. And he would like a price estimate for that. And I said, no problem. Let me get that together for you. So I gave him the price estimate, which was $118, let's say. So $118 for what was necessary for his puppy at that moment in his vaccine series. And he just blinked and looked at me and said, well, I can afford that. Do you have an appointment right now? And I said, yeah, absolutely. Like, I'll walk you into the exam room and we'll get it done right now. So this man, because there is no price transparency, had the assumption. I asked him, how much did you think this was going to cost? And he said about $400. So he was not getting preventative veterinary care because he just had this assumption from somewhere within, within his experiences, the veterinary care was much more expensive than it actually was. And so nothing happened to his dog, obviously, but how many people are foregoing preventative care or, even life-saving medical care because they presume that something's going to be way more expensive than it actually is. I've had that a lot of times, right?
yeah.
People choosing to put down a blocked cat because they think that it's a $3,000 or $4,000 thing when I could have did it for $1,200. And when they hear that, it's soul crushing.
Wonder if this is also an indication of like consumers shifting their spending habits away from necessarily the high sticker shock of what they presume to be the veterinary visit, $400 or $500 to your point there, Cody. I mean, I was just reading this article in Crunchbase, and they were talking about the investments that have gone to early stage startups in the pet space. Loyal, a developer of longevity drugs for dogs, they've recently raised 45 million in a Series B. Mammally is a German startup that's raised 18 million to make meals, snacks, and supplements for dogs with particular emphasis on alleviating some of those ailments that come with aging. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them. Spot and Tango, A Pup Above is another one, focusing on frozen and dry food formulated for senior dogs. So I wonder how much of this is like an opportunity in some parts of the business world where they're creating businesses that have maybe a lower daily cost with a lower sticker shock, right? And so consumers are finding a little bit easier way. It's easier to stomach a daily expense of $5 on my dog because I could I'll believe that it's going to last or make my dog live a couple more years, as opposed to hitting that $400 or $500 vet bill every year or something like that, right? Maybe there's that fear of cost that's driving some of these other early stage startup opportunities. I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting correlation,
Well,
maybe.
and
Mhm.
is there, should we be doing more pet owner education? We being the entire AHA, AVMA, Ontario VMA, the educating what is good care. Now I know that's amorphous. What is good? How much is a lot? But there are some basics and best practices. Maybe we have a responsibility to provide to overcome, because that client, Cody, that you mentioned, they got that price somewhere. Is it social media? Is it they were watching a YouTube or a TikTok, whatever, Snap, that, and they saw that and that planted in their head, whether it was right or wrong, that seed that made him, until you dispelled that myth, they got it from somewhere. and we're not out there trying to correct misinformation.
No, and I appreciate both of your guys' comments, because sometimes I just kind of like, woe is me. And I've written letters to my VMA. I've tried to affect change. I've given them examples of different medical associations within, within my province that has, more lax and price transparency. But like, yeah, I could do a better job. Like, I wish I could just post what my vaccine and wellness costs are and what my spay and neuter costs are, because I think that they're fair, and I think that's good education, but I could do a better job of discussing just this locally, right? That this is what is better care, this is what is to be expected, this is how you find this information. I need to do that, so I appreciate that.
Well,
What
coming back
about,
around to
And
where we started,
oh,
that UK survey, I mean, it's about client education. They're
Right?
not
100%,
being
100%.
educated for whatever reason.
It's like,
Yeah.
they say culture develops whether you manage it or not.
Right.
Yeah,
The
you'll get,
consumer's going to
there's
get
always,
educated,
yep.
whether you're contributing to that education or not. Somebody's
Yeah.
going to teach them what they
I-
think good health to be.
This story is just sticking in my mind, but it's almost like the opposite side. So I had an appointment the other day. It was a vaccine appointment, this beautiful golden retriever. And I was doing my vaccine appointment, asking my questions, doing my client education portion. And I had just made a message. I had talked to them about, annual blood work. The client said, yeah, absolutely. I'm really interested in annual blood work. I said, no problem. We'll get that sorted for you. And then I had made this mention. I said, I can tell you really love your pet. Like this, you really care for her. I've got a veterinarian who also has a golden, Dr. Lauren, and she's obsessed with her golden retriever. And I said, not only does she get, annual blood work, but she actually gets abdominal ultrasound every 6 months on her. And I was just trying to make this point of like, this is how much Dr. Lauren loves her dog, which I don't get abdominal ultrasound on my dog every 6 months. But Dr. Lauren does, because she's trying everything she can to do early cancer screening on this breed that's predisposed, right? I didn't offer abdominal ultrasound to this client in this vaccine appointment. I often don't, because I feel like then I'm a real car salesman if I'm saying like, oh yeah, annual wellness. Oh, here's your parasite prevention. Oh, have you considered annual blood work? Would you like this $600 abdominal ultrasound? That seems really extreme, right? And I don't do that in every appointment. But the client looked at me with wild eyes and she said, is that an option? And I said, yeah, that's an option. She's like, what else are you not telling me? I'm like, well, there's actually is quite a few things that like I don't typically bring up in an annual wellness. She booked the abdominal ultrasound right there. She like it was a wellness appointment that the bill was like $700.
so Cody,
But she got what she wanted.
But
She got what she
what she
wanted. So
wanted.
I did a bad job on the other side, right? I'd only made mention because I just was making conversation.
what about pet insurance, gentlemen? Speaking as Kelly, the pet owner, my dog has definitely needed pet insurance, but because pet insurance has been so beneficial, he has thyroid issues, he's allergic to chicken. I mean, he's a golden doodle, he has things. I talk to pet owners when I see puppies walking on the street. I'll go up to them and say, do you have pet insurance? And they're like, what is that? Like, isn't that expensive? And I said, if you start when they're young, it can be like 20, 30 bucks, depending on I said, there's like 34 different pet insurance companies out there that you can go talk to. It changes per things. And they're like, I didn't know this was the thing. And I'm like, yeah, it's a thing. So what about pet insurance? I know in the UK, if you're a pet owner, you pretty much have to have pet insurance. So it's a different conversation for bills. But what about pet insurance? How does that change things?
So
That
my general like this is my general thought. So absolutely in my practice, in a puppy appointment, it's brought up several times throughout their series. Educating people on pet insurance, on the sooner the better. We don't have any sort of alliance to any specific one, but we just educate. We provide resources, we provide education, and talk to them about that. My general opinion on Unfiltered, on veterinary pet insurance, is corporate is the benefactor, and there's no shock that there's no shock that the UK uptake is higher, where there's a higher level of corporatization. But a general practice, in my opinion, is not the biggest benefactor of pet insurance. It's the emergency clinics, it's the specialty clinics. I just had a couple of dogs come through my practice, and their 2-day claims were 130,000, 140,000, and they were healthy dogs. At times I feel like the pet insurance corporatization, I feel like I'm going to get assassinated for saying this. It's all connected. In my opinion, there's a nefarious aspect to the entirety of that. One of the reason why costs in specialty centers, referral centers, 24-hour centers are as high as they are is because they're only catering to pet owners that have pet insurance. It's very obvious to me, and it's very sad for the ones that don't have pet insurance that can't access that. So just wanted to go on my little soapbox on pet insurance. I'm a huge supporter. My own dog has pet insurance. As a veterinarian who can afford pet care, on an owner level, I think it's a super no-brainer. But like, we got to unpack this whole, like, who owns the insurance companies? Do you guys know who owns Trupanion? Do you know who they're partnered with? Do you know who their affiliate companies are? Do you know how this whole thing works? Right? It's all connected. We can't just blindly say pet insurance great for pet owners. We've got to talk about it as a profession, as to, like, what does this actually mean? Because at the end of the day, on aggregate, I would probably argue somebody that pet insurance has hurt more pets than it's helped, because it's taken the access of non-insured pets, it's taken access to care too expensive, and it's definitely hurt a lot of pets.
Well, I think that's another topic for another time.
Yeah,
I'm gonna write that one down, Cody. You better show up.
we gotta revisit that one.
Discussion.
Yeah, what do we have, 2 minutes left to unpack that?
Yeah, I don't know if we could cover that in the next 2 minutes, but we could cover that in the next 20 minutes at another recording. So let's tackle that, because that's an interesting conversation. I mean, pet insurance goes from people don't know about it to what all the interconnectedness you were talking about. But rounding the corner back today, about price transparency, education, right? Helping the person understand the options, like you were talking about the golden, Cody, and that consumer was like, what? There's more things for my pet that I didn't realize. Isn't there doesn't it always seem there's more to do than there's hours in the day? Like, right? I mean, like, we're all talking about how we can improve and we can do things, and it's always just picking that one to top three priorities in a day. What can we do in a day to do it? But I think everybody in agreement today, I will pretend to be Peter this time and wrap us up, since Peter is not here, is that we can empower ourselves and choose 1 to 3 things. Like Cody, you were saying earlier, you could do a better job with education, right? And I think it's like somebody always saying, you can always improve your communication style. Like, you can never stop learning how to communicate better as a human being. I think the same goes for education. But if we all actively choose 1 to 3 things to work on in a day or a week or a month, we can move the needle to the positive. We can do things better. And I'm going to also say, not only doing, is listening. Like, you were listening to that client, Cody. You were talking about a story, And then you were picking up that the client was interested and she was talking more about it, and you carried the ball from there. That took active listening. You didn't shut her down. So I think we can all do things, but we can also listen as well, because that just cycles around to how we can improve ourselves, because we get feedback when we listen. So thank you, everybody, today. It was a great discussion, and we will look forward to the next episode, perhaps on pet insurance at Unfiltered Vet Discussions. Until then, have a great day.